On 13th June 1997, 59 people died of asphyxia in a fire in Delhi's Uphaar Cinema during the screening of the Hindi film Border. Over 100 were injured in a subsequent stampede. What followed next was a tortuous 25 years of trials and tribulations. In the end, one is still left wondering, was justice truly served? The Uphaar tragedy and the legal battle thereafter is etched in our collective memory. It is in many ways a landmark case, but is it also a cautionary tale? I want to take that conversation ahead with the couple who fought that battle and the makers and cast of a new Netflix series on this tragedy. Joining me is Neelam and Shekhar Krishnamoorthy, who lost both their kids in this tragedy and fought a long legal battle for justice. Abhay Deol and Rajshri Deshpande, who play the couple in the Netflix series Trial by Fire, and the director of the series, Prashant Nair, all joining us. Thank you for everyone to be with us on CNN News 18. This Netflix series is based on the book by the same name, written by Neelam and Shekhar, and the series drops January 13. I want to begin with Neelam ma'am here. Writing a book can be a very cathartic experience. Was the making of this series also cathartic for you, or was it difficult to go through everything that you went through when you're putting it on film, say?
I was only involved in writing the book. I wasn't involved in the series. All that I did was I met Prashant, and they had the book with them, and whatever other material they required, I shared all the material with them. So apart from that, I wasn't really, because I'm not a creative person, and these people are, so I think I left the job to them. I think it was their best at doing what they want to do.
But how does it feel that your story, which has been reported many times, it has of course been written about by yourself and others, is now going to be watched? That's a very different experience. Somebody is going to play you, somebody is going to, show the world what you went through. How is that experience for you?
To be very honest, I wasn't interested. I wasn't. But Shekhar convinced me and the 2-3 of my friends who said, no, I think this is a story which needs to be told and the world must know what it is. How you've really fought, you've been so resilient, you've been patience and perseverance. What are the obstacles? And probably that's the only reason I wrote in the book. And in fact, the book is much more exhaustive. They can't put everything together in 6 or 7 episodes. So I think that was the only reason I agreed, because people must know, one, about that how difficult it is to get justice in this country. Yeah. That also, when the case is so open, it's an open and shut case. It's like you see the swearing in of the Prime Minister on the television. Everybody saw how people died, how they were taken out from the balcony, the dead body was brought out. Everybody knew who the owners of Uphaar. Yet it's taken me 20 years, odd years, to prove that they were guilty right up till the Supreme Court. And yet they've been allowed to walk free. So this is the kind of a country we are living in. I think people need to know that whether they really want to waste their time and resources to go to the courts to get justice. And is this justice? No, this wasn't justice. This was a judgment delivered by the Supreme Court, which is of no use to me. Maybe it can be used by the other accused to get scot-free, citing their old age.
That indeed is the complexity of this case, Shekharji, isn't it? But she said that, you kind of convinced her that this needs to be done. Why is that?
The reason is that the book, exactly, book hardly, I wouldn't expect that the people would have read the book, or maybe 10,000 people, 15,000 people.
Not the masses.
Not the masses. And I told her that, look, our story has to be told, because not because of me and Neelam have fought the case, but the reality, what is the importance of fire safety in this country, and how a common man has to struggle to get justice. That was important. And people must know before entering the court what they have to face. Like, a victim is actually totally eclipsed from the criminal justice system. If there are no victims, I say that if there are no victims, you don't need courts. So we have to face so much of, humiliation in the court as victim. Each time you're asked, what's your locus standi? Why you want to be here? Because they say the state is fighting for you. But we know the limitations of the state. So we are actually, assisting the prosecution. And, believe me, we had to read the 45,000 pages of documents. We met the experts in all the fields to know, because we were a novice. Me and Neelam had not even seen a court. 97 was the first time he stepped into a court. So we didn't know the difference between a respondent and a petitioner. We didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So we had to learn everything. We had to learn everything from start. So the only thing that Neelam asked me on 14th, I remember, 14th, he said, what do you want to do? Because everybody said, no, they're very big. How are you going to fight? You're going to fight the system. I said, no, I'm with you. And being in business, I knew that I had faith in her, and I knew that she was an achiever. And I said, let's go, I'm with you.
Regardless of everything that will come your way.
My take is that I could not spend a single rupee on 13th of June to save my kids.
Yeah.
So that was irrelevant. I used to be out of the Delhi most of the time with the business. I said, no, it's worthless. Whom are you going to earn for?
Yeah.
So we said, look, we have to fight, we fight. But frankly speaking, we didn't know that we had to fight for 25 years, 20 years to get justice.
And then
so
in the end also, as she's saying, is that truly justice?
Well, it's a cliche.
It's a cliche.
In a country, when it's justice delayed is justice denied, it's actually a cliche now. It doesn't mean anything. You hear all the anchors talking about it. But very frankly speaking, justice is always denied in our country, barring a few who are rich and powerful, or the politicians. These are the only people where justice is delivered and the matters are heard early. Otherwise, ordinary citizens, 97% of the Indians, justice is not delayed. Or if there is a public outrage, yes. As in case of Jessica Lal or Nirbhaya, justice delivered within 1 year. The rest of us can wait for eternity.
Yeah, and then what point is there? Prashant, I want to understand from you as the director and the maker of this series, why the Uphaar tragedy? What drew you to make a film or a series on this? When did you start on this and why?
So, apart from everything they've said about, how avoidable this tragedy was if the right precautions had been put in place and the right policies were in place and, the failure of the judicial system to deliver something that should have been obvious and deserved. Aside from that, look, you've spoken with them. I find them to be two incredibly inspiring individuals. After suffering such a devastating loss, they got up, they stood up, and they began to fight for what they believed they deserved. And they didn't stop, and they went on and on in the face of numerous obstacles for so many years, every day showing up and having to revisit things that no one should have to revisit in the process. And for me, just felt that sharing this story might inspire other people to do the same, and that perhaps this is what it really takes to make change, this kind of fortitude and resilience that they are shining examples of. So I was inspired, and I wanted to share their story and tell their story because I felt that if we can find even a fraction of their courage and their strength, then maybe things would be very different. And so that for me was what really drew me to that.
I want to speak to Abhay and Rajshri also because you portray Neelam and Shekhar. Abhay, let me ask you this. As an actor, of course, you've done all kinds of roles. You are known for someone who likes to do gritty, very real stuff. But how do you approach something when you're, portraying a real life person whose life is pretty well documented and they have documented their struggle in a book? How do you approach something like that? Is that tougher?
Yeah, so it's not a question of tougher. Each thing has its own, so to speak. So, for example, if this was a fiction, it would have been easy to get into it, do it, and get out of it and move on. This being a true story, and then it also being as tragic as it is, was more difficult to get out of, and in an ironic way, easier to get into, because if you're just taken in and surprised and shocked by, well, not just the incident, which I was aware of already, but their journey and what they stand for and what they went through and why they did the things they did. It just inspired you to get into it. It didn't take much. Obviously, a director helps, so he didn't want us to necessarily meet them and mime them and get their superficial characteristics of how they speak and walk. His instruction to me was, I want the reality to come out here. I want you to feel it. I want you to be relatable. You all are both urban, middle-class people. There's no difference between you and them. I want to get into the truth of this matter, and I want to bring that out of you. Obviously, he was coming from his own truth. He was coming from his own conviction. He was coming from his own point of view, and I was just imbibing that, really. It's like, one of the things you're most afraid of when it comes to true story is exploiting it. And Prashant wasn't coming from a space of exploitation. He was coming from a space of concern and inspiration concerned because this is historic, and what Shekhar stands for example, is let's get policy in there, let it not happen to anybody else. What Neelam stands for is let's get justice so that people will, be more careful next time, and they'll know that our lives matter. So that was really the base that I took. And honestly, the toughest thing was really getting out of it, not getting into it.
It lingers, isn't it, a story like this?
Yeah, it lingers, and it's still hard to... Like, imagine this happened to you. And that's one of the things...
In fact, it's unimaginable. You can't truly put yourself in...
You can imagine it
Neelam
happening to you, but you can't imagine the pain.
Yeah. You don't know exactly what you will feel.
You won't know what you feel. You would think you'd be sad, of course you would be. You'd think you would cry, of course you would cry. But I don't think you could actually really understand the pain of losing a child. Did you actually lose a child? You can empathize with that. You can theoretically understand it, but not experientially. These are one of those things that, you wouldn't wish on your enemies.
Yeah. Rajshri, what about you? You're playing the central role of Neelam Krishnamurthy, who has, fought through, and, she... how do you portray that kind of resilience and also helplessness at one level? Because as Abhay was saying, these are middle-class families who were fighting against the big and mighty. Literally no one supported you at that time. Everybody felt that this was either a pointless exercise or it's going to be a hurtful exercise for you. And yet, the two people go on and do it. How do you bring that in your on the screen?
When the casting director and Prashant Nair approached me for the role, and after all the process, Prashant said, okay, you're on board and this is the material. Before that, I was not knowing like a lot of details. Of course, I knew that there is something happened, but that too through my mother and all. But I was unaware of many other things, because we get into our mundane life and things happen and we move on. So when I was going through the material and I was going through all the footage and everything, and I was going through tons of emotions, from rage to from anger to so like everything at the same time. And I was thinking that how unaware we all are about so many things. How we just don't pay attention to so many things. We just look at it, oh shit, this happened, and we move on with things. And we don't even feel that, it can happen to you. It can happen to any one of us. Yeah. So I was, of course, going through all that and preparing Neelam, or understanding Neelam it was not that easy. I had to, because most of my characters, I had to go through a process. I always feel that I'm never on a holiday, because I have to constantly absorb and understand, and I constantly see people to, maybe this is something which that character cannot. So I'm never on a chutti. So, but Neelam was different. Neelam, I had to understand to find, basically what he said, find the emotional truth. And that's what it has to go deep inside me, so the strength was the first thing it came into my mind. As a mother, how Neelam has approached, like how Neelam has lived 25 years with that. I had to go through everything. Of course, it's a 1-year journey we had, but the reality, the deep, going through the deeper emotions was the first thing for me. So the preparation was till the last day.
So, Neelamji, a lot of people will want to understand, where did that strength come from? Because in countless tragedies in our country, people have lost their loved ones and near and dear ones. But there are very few stories of individuals like you who have fought the battle regardless of how difficult it is for over 2 decades. Is it possible for you to encapsulate where that strength came from? Was that just purely the strength of a mother wanting justice and dignity for the life and death of their children, or more?
No, my life revolved around my children. And when they were gone, I didn't know what I was living for. And I realized, I would do anything for my children, because my son was an asthmatic. So I would have to be alert all the time, be able to rush him to a doctor any time and everything. But then it didn't mean that if there were no more, so my duty as a mother was over. So then Shekhar asked me, what do we do? So, and I told him I need to fight to get justice. I think what was important thing was that he stood by me and he believed in me, what I did, and he said, I'm with you, whatever you decide, we'll go ahead and do it. He didn't tell me, okay, like others were suggesting, that maybe start a family, have another child. I mean, it's not that you can replace your children, they're not toys. So yes, then I promised my children. Some mothers promised to her children that promise to Unnati and Ujjwal, come what may, I will get justice for you. Doesn't matter how difficult it is. Because I know myself, once I decide to do something, I do it. I don't give up halfway. And no amount of pressure or anything worked on me. I knew it would not, I would never give in, irrespective of who the person was telling me, because I don't listen to anyone.
Not only were you fighting the big and mighty in this case, but I believe you were cajoled in many ways to give up the case. You were offered money. You were even your life was put under threat, and yet through all of that, you continued on.
Absolutely, because you see, number one, I became very fearless because I had nothing more to lose. I had lost the most precious thing in my life. So both me and Shekhar, we said, okay, fine. Maximum these people can do is they can kill us. Nothing worse than that. So we were prepared for that any time. So it's okay, if that happens, it has to happen, it has to happen. And money is one thing. You see, when on that day we couldn't spend anything on our children, so money is not important for us.
What worth is money when you
What are we
can't
going
save
to
your
do with the
children?
money? If we couldn't spend a penny on our children, and not that, we didn't have money, we have plenty of money that day, the day the children, it happened. But we couldn't spend anything. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even take them to a doctor. I mean, your child falls sick. Every parent prays to the God. We didn't even get that opportunity to pray, oh, please save them. I mean, all I know is by the time I went and lit the lamp in the house and say, God, because I had a sort of, I started feeling uneasy. I went and lit the lamp. So went into my mandir and lit the lamp saying, wherever my children, I hope they're safe. Later on, I realized by the time I'd done it, there were no more. And that's the last day I lit a lamp in my temple. The last time I went to a temple. I mean, I stopped believing in God. What is there? What can I ask him now? I've lost the most precious. So I think, and of course the money didn't matter. Threats, I told you already. And also along with this, I have to fight the system. It isn't easy to fight the system. You know how this country works. There's so much of red tapeism at every stage. There is a lot of bureaucracy involved. But I would say I was fortunate at some places. I've come across some good bureaucrats. They have been empathetic. They've been helpful. And obviously for reasons enough, I can't name them on the show. I've not named them in my book. But yes, deep down here, I'm very obliged.
I watched a few episodes of the series and two things really struck me, Shekhar. One is that even ordinary people you've known on your life, possibly well-meaning people, good people at heart, gave up on you and almost turned on you, right? There's an instance of your neighbor, for example, that is portrayed. And the second thing that really struck me is when Neelam ji is going to meet, you can call him a bureaucrat or an official of the electricity department. And the man says the report in itself is action.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's the problem in India, right? You'll get a report, somebody will say these are the problems, you'll even get a committee formed, and that is action. What happens beyond that is the issue.
It's just thrown an obscure corner of any department. That's what happens. But when Naresh Kumar gave his report, 15 days, he gave the report, and an excellent report, which dealt with everything. The first thing we went and asked him that, yes, we want the copy of the report. First he was a little, he was reluctant. But after that, knowing Neelam, and she took up the matter, he called up, he said, no, come and take the reports. So that was the starting point. That is the thing where actually we read and said, what happened in there? Everybody could have been saved.
Yeah.
It was an avoidable tragedy. What they had to do was just open the door, let everybody walk in, because the right side of the balcony, the smoke affected after about 20 minutes. So what they did was that they, they blocked the gangway, they blocked one of the exits for the VVIP box, the exit of the family. And all those, and my kids were sitting A4 and 5. Had there been a gangway and an exit, they would have just walked out. All the people from the right side, not only my kids, even all the people from the right side would have walked out. So unfortunately, the people died of asphyxia. And most of the people, when they saw the smoke coming behind the screen, they thought it's a special effect because Border being a film, 1971 war, they thought probably it's an effect. And fortunately for the people sitting in the auditorium, everybody got out because there was 4 exits, which was throwing you out on a service lane. So when we read everything, everybody could have been saved. Nothing was working that day. PA system was not working. They didn't have an emergency light. The footlights was not burning. The exit light was. How can you run a theatre being a builder? You know the rules. You have knowledge that yes, you have to have one door for every 100 patrons. How can you be so callous in providing basics?
I wish I could say that the situation is different, but unfortunately we haven't quite learnt our lessons. And that is why, Prashant, this story is so important, isn't it? It needs to be reinforced. Absolutely. And as citizens, we need to be more aware as well of what we should demand from, when we go to these establishments and their services.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of the judicial system, the last figure I read was 4.5 crores cases stuck in the courts. And I read recently also that the Mumbai Fire Brigade gets almost 1 call every day because of a structural collapse. So as we grow and as things grow, these are critical things because they're the foundations of our growth. So I feel their story is unfortunately more relevant than ever today.
And Rajshri, what do you think is the central message that people will get when they watch this story? Is it of hope, or could it even be of hopelessness?
I feel, the most important part is what has happened will happen to any one of us. So, learn and make sure that it doesn't happen. So make sure, stand up. If it happens, stand up for yourself, stand up for others, stand up for the whole society. Come together. So I feel that is something which, it's the most important from Neelam and Shekhar and the whole Abu team. Come together and fight what is right.
Even if you're fighting someone big and, seemingly unsurmountable challenges. Abhay, I want to end with you. I started the show by asking that this is, of course, a landmark case. In many ways, it has set precedents in our country. But is it also a cautionary tale that you can fight for 25 years and, as Neelam ma'am is saying, still feel that not what needed to be done was done? Like, there's very little price, for example, those accused in this case have paid. And the time it has taken is just so enormous that it almost loses its meaning. According to you, what is the central message of the story as you portrayed in the series? Will people be left with more hope, or with the idea that the power of one is as important as it's always been, or something more pessimistic?
No, I think just taking from what you said is we are under a system that does tend to delay, that does take time. We have many systemic problems. Corruption has always been there, an issue. But it's within that system that both Neelam and Shekhar have, well, I think they've come above. They might not think so. They might feel that there's a long way to go. And from their perspective, I can see that because they are going to fight till the end. Until the end is not complete, it's still a work in progress. But in that process, they've done so much. They've opened so much. So when you say, is it a cautionary tale? Well, it's a tale. And it gives people like us inspiration to then create. Now, when this goes out there, the book was out, now the show will go out, that will have an impact on those who read and those who view. History will not be forgotten. The lives lost will not have gone in vain. So, there's always a silver lining to be found somewhere. Something as tragic as this, it's harder to do so. But you have to find that silver lining, because that's what we are born for, I think, is to evolve, right? Evolution is a natural process. And this is that part. And sadly, it's the most tragic of things that pushes us forward to make change. We never learn from what we do right. We always learn from what we do wrong, from our mistakes. So I would say there's hope as long as people like Neelam and Shekhar are alive and do what they do, as long as their families who continue to stand by them and they work together as a team. They formed a community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Based on what? Human value. And they're not just fighting for themselves, for the likes of you and I. There's hope there. I don't see it as a hopeless case now.
Well, that's a good note to end our discussion on. I do thank all of you for joining us, and many congratulations to the makers of the series as well. As I mentioned, January 13 is when the series drops. You can watch it on Netflix. Once again, many thanks for joining us here on CNN News 18.
Thank you.